Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.
Hello and welcome to this month's Talking Tactics. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Polikoff, along with our other host, Sam Villani, who's sporting the latest yardware. And as I guess, as they say in the news business or whatever, RJ's not here because he's on assignment. He's actually out in Michigan. They're teaching at the Great Lakes Fire Conference. Got a really good show lined up today. Pleased to have a friend of both Sam and mine, Chief Shane Darwick. Chief Darwick is retiree out of Montgomery County, Maryland. He retired as a battalion chief. Did a quick stint over in Carroll County as the training chief, and currently is the deputy chief of volunteer services in Frederick County. Full disclosure, he's my boss, but I couldn't ask for a better boss because we have a really good time at work. And the most important thing is lunches, and if we're there for longer, then what kind of dinners that we're going to have. So with all that, Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
So we got a really good show lined up. Last month, we talked a little bit of tactics, rapid intervention stuff. I wanted to kind of move forward a little bit. We're going to talk about engine and truck work as it pertains to what the company officers that are riding those individual pieces should be doing on the fire ground, things that they should be looking for as they approach the scene, best practices, maybe throw in a little bit of stories here and there. But what I like to call, I always pull up a sports reference to engine and truck work. I compare it to what they call the battery for baseball. And the battery is the pitcher and the catcher, and those two work together throughout the entire game. And I view engine and truck work as the battery on the fire service. Yeah, there's other units that are there, but for the most part, a good truck company and a good engine company really set the pace when it comes to a working fire. So let's just dive right into it. So let's start off with engine company work, and I'll go to you, Shane. Riding that front seat of the engine. I know it's been a long time, but you still have that experience behind you. Plus, you're teaching the new firefighters that are coming in with the new recruits and things like that, even with the new officers. What are some of the things that you used to look for when you rode the front seat? And then what have you learned, and what are you passing on to these new officers?
Well, riding the front seat, you have that responsibility, and looking at your crew, what you have, bring it to the fire. What can you do with what you have? Sometimes you might have a really strong crew, and sometimes you could have a weak crew. We've all experienced that as well. So that's one of the things that you're thinking about what you can do once you get there, and what you're capable of, and what can an engine company actually do. Can you, for instance, a master stream. Are you good for one master stream or two hand lines? Sometimes you can only get one hand line off. En route, you're thinking the area, and hopefully you have a driver that knows the area as well, and hydrants and water supply in the area. And it depends too if you're running a rural water operation or an urban operation or city operations. So we used to run into Prince George's County, out of Tacoma Park, if you're familiar with that area, and companies are right on top of each other, and you're bidding for hydrants and getting that first in spot. But leaving room for the special service or ladder truck was important. Knowing that you have some ladders on your engine, don't ever forget that as well. So you have a 24 and 14 on there. You can always use those, both in the rural setting as well as into the city type operations and the urban operations. So those are some of the things right off the bat I can think of.
What about you, Sam? It hasn't been that long since you've been on a fire engine. What are some of the things that that has struck you as you've learned throughout the years, and what are you kind of passing on to your new officers that are coming into your battalion?
Before I go into that, I wanted to, I meant to say this in the introduction, but just so the fire engineering community knows, both of these guys were kind of like my mentors growing up on the job, and worked in very busy engine companies where we had a plethora of garden apartments in our first battalion. And make no mistake, both Shane and Dave, I paid attention. And I had an opportunity to work at both 16 and 1 where, Dave certainly did some time at 1. I know Chiefy did time at both as well. But one thing I definitely learned from you all is you got to know those gardens. You got to be in them. And sometimes just running the medical locals isn't enough. You got to get your folks back in there. You've got to know what your grade changes are. You've got to know your access. Think about like the stuff across Marla Street and all that. Like some of the addresses that carried Piney Branch, you weren't getting off of Piney Branch, that kind of stuff. So the biggest thing with me with gardens is first is knowing your response district, and I can tell you, I've got gardens across the street from my battalion firehouse that I some people will be like managers, leaders. What keeps you up at night? That keeps me up at night. What's across the street from my battalion firehouse is a couple hundred garden apartments, all densely populated. A lot of them with young families, and I've been working with our community risk reduction folks to do a smoke detector push over there because we've noticed a couple incidents that we didn't have smoke detectors. And but the reason I know that is because I'm over there, even though I'm not riding the front seat of the engine company. That's across the street from the firehouse, and that's a busy firehouse. Them cats can be out. All of them can be out, and I'm first due, not just first due chief, but first due. I'll be the first thing on the scene, and I might have to take action. And I actually had to do that on a choking like maybe 6 months ago. They rang out a choking, a kid choking, actively choking, not breathing. And I'm like, shit, I'm the only one in the firehouse and shot over there. But knowing those guard departments is huge. And then of course the other thing is, you're on an engine company. Which one of those hose lines that you have set up is going to make which apartment? And definitely down where we worked on the engine companies there, we had hose loads set up specifically to make certain parts, and we knew where we had to either extend a line or whether we had to take a line up through a stairwell or up through a ladder. We know those places. We know them intimately, and again, you've got, when the bells ring, it's not just running the medical calls and getting familiarized that way. It's going over there and drilling and knowing exactly what on your engine company can do what on that fire ground.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always like to go back to the garden apartments because that seems that can jam up new officers, whether they're the old garden apartments, whether they were pre World War II built or post World War II built. Those can really trip up a new officer and even a veteran officer because of the spaces and the avenues for that fire to travel. It's nothing to see smoke coming from the eaves of a 3-story garden apartment building and having a fire in the basement or in the terrace level or one of the lowest levels. And that's why it's imperative. One of the things that I tell new officers when they're running these garden department fires, you have to get somebody to the lowest level as quickly as possible. And I know we built that into our policy with Frederick. I know it's built into the policy in Montgomery County, probably in most of the mid-Atlantic departments, at least in the Washington metropolitan area, and even in the Baltimore metropolitan area, that getting to that lowest level quickly is imperative. That first due engine company, as they're stretching that line in, that first due officer on the truck or the engine, if they're running together, they may drop down to the lower level real quick and peek, making sure if you got smoke on the lower level, chances are that's where it is, and we need to start there. But even if that doesn't happen, your second due engine company or your third due engine company, they have to get down into those lower levels just to make sure that everything's fine. Same thing with high rises. I mean, you stretch from, you might hook up from the floor below or 2 floors below, but you're definitely poking your head out on those floors below as you're moving up, not only to get the layout of the floor and where that apartment is in conjunction to where you're pulling that line, but also if there's smoke on those lower levels, you think it's on the 8th floor and you got smoke on the 7th floor, you really need to investigate that first, because smoke usually goes up before it goes down. So that's important. So I want to go back to you, Shane. We're talking a little bit about garden apartments, and I know you from your background in Prince George's County as a volunteer, and then moving into Montgomery County in the 1st Battalion, where garden department heavy. What are some of the things that you are looking for as a command officer, and then also what you were looking for as a unit officer, whether it be on the engine and the truck?
So on the unit, as a unit officer, I always wanted to make sure I had enough hose to make the apartment. So I know that you guys are familiar with some of the layouts, even like a Bethesda, we used to call it the Bradley Boulevard lay, or the Piney Branch Road lay, where we got come in and you have the leader line to the 1st floor, and then take your rack or your high-rise pack and make at least 50 feet to the floor you're going to attack the fire. So that was something we deployed and worked on a lot. And the best way I like to run that was I would take the pack or the rack or the high-rise pack, throw that on my shoulder, and my driver and firefighter would bring the leader line to the steps, where I could get that rack to the at least the 1st floor, and then build it from there. And I can take see what we have, a little circle check or 360, and know what we have before we make our attack. And then having enough hose line, because we go up and grab the standard 200-foot attack line on a garden, sometimes it's not going to make it down the hall into that back bedroom. So having a breakaway nozzle, knowing how to use that. And also we used a lot of we carried a milk jug with some webbing in it. And I know you're familiar with that, with the longer sections, or horizontal high rise, we call them, that you'd run in and you throw your the webbing out the window, and your driver would give your attack line, and you'd bring it up to the floor that you're going to attack the fire. Funny story, I got to a fire and I said, "Hey, Rook, throw the webbing, throw the bottle out the window," because we would just take and throw it and hold on to the one end, and then the driver would tie the nozzle and bring it up. Boy, he threw the whole thing out the window. So it was
I knew that was what you were going to say.
But, so that was the biggest thing.
And that's, I think that people need to understand, we used to have the old flying standpipe where they would, put the ladder truck or the tower up there. And then you would see that they could connect to the end of the tower, and that would give you water up there. I'm kind of against that. I'm okay if you want to bring the hose line up there through the tower, but I don't agree with like tying a tower up as a water supply, and now that thing can't move, if something has to happen. But the milk jug, you just take an old milk jug or an old bleach bottle, clean it out, put in 100 feet of webbing, maybe a carabiner, a cheap carabiner, and you toss the one end out the window, and you just hoist that up in the apartment next door or apartment across the hall or whatever, and you go and you make your attack. And when I was in Glen Echo, we have a couple of buildings that really, really long hallways, like almost 250 feet just for the hallway. And, so your normal, 200-foot line is not going to reach there. So you talked about the garden apartment lay, using 2.5 or 3 inch with a gated Y, and then coming off with your high rise pack. Some companies run with longer lines. They may have a 400-foot line. with the way some of these engine companies are now and the amount of pressures that they can generate with their pumps, it's not unheard of to see a 500-foot line to be able to be pumped. The old uh, uh, taboo was if you're pumping more than 200 psi, then something's wrong. And nowadays these fire engines can pump 200 psi at idle. So it's something to take into consideration when you are looking at
It is.
pulling those long lines.
Well, you mentioned the 300 and 400 foot lines, and sometimes you got to be careful about that because you can still come up short. With the leader line, you can pretty much bring it to where you want with that, but you're building it. But along with that, we did some relays with companies and different people trying it, and we could deploy the leader line just as fast as like a 400-foot line. And one of the things is with 300 and 400 foot lines is it gets cumbersome at some point around a car or an alley or something like that, where on the leader line operation, you got two people just getting that leader line into operation, like I said, and take one person taking the rack ahead and getting that into place where you want it. So that's something you need to drill on in your area to understand what works best for you. But yeah, that's what we found best work for us.
Yeah, definitely training is the key, especially if you're going to go the long line, that's one thing, but training on that leader line, you'd be surprised how fast you can get 400 feet in service with 3 inch with a gated Y and hustling. It's a lot of training, and I know that's nothing strange for the Washington metropolitan, even in the Baltimore area, of running those leader lines. People know exactly what you're talking about. Let's shift gears a little bit and moving away from the garden apartments, and let's look at some townhouses and row houses and things like that. Coming into the block, we know the engine company, we want to make sure that they're leaving room for the truck. But riding the front seat of the ladder truck as an experienced officer, and I say that because I truly believe that the experienced people should be riding the special services. That's me. People may not agree with that. Sometimes we don't have that choice because of the people that are in the station. But that officer, when you were riding the ladder truck, the truck at 16 and some of the other companies that you were at, what were you doing as an officer when you're arriving into that block, knowing that maybe you're going to have some work based on what the information that you're getting? What are you looking for as an officer?
When you come into that block, you're going to be looking for if you can use that aerial or if it's going to be necessary. Are you going to be able to get your ladders off? A lot of our townhouse complexes are very difficult to get into. We looked at, I was impressed when we bought some ladder trucks, where it was like 3 ladder trucks in Montgomery County that were the tiller operation trucks, were versus the tower. They bought a bunch of towers, like 10 towers that had the crab feature. Now those towers really impressed me, where we could really use those on the townhouse fire. And sometimes it felt like when the TDA got there, the tiller drawn aerial, it's like, thanks for coming, but I'd rather have a tower right here, so that getting that tower into operation is important. If you're on a truck company like that, and getting that tower in there gives you that bucket, gives you lots of options, versus the ladder. You can use the stick. Yes. You can put the master stream up. Some master streams, you on a straight truck, you have to make the adjustments or place a pipe on it. So that takes time. As a command officer on a garden apartment, when the ladder truck or towers come in, I found that it takes time to put an aerial stream into operation. You think about it. Hey, I pull up, I got heavy fire or multiple windows was presenting fire, and I want to hit it with the master streams. Let's get that tower up, okay? Then we'll make an exterior attack, and then we'll mop up. We'll go in. That's the plan, right? So, as an incident commander, you're sitting there. Well, why isn't that stick going up? So it takes quite a bit of time. So how fast as a crew to set up and put in operation your master stream? It can go anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes, depending on your crew. You got to establish your water supply, put your stabilizers down, and get that thing into operation. Well, fire doubles in size every minute. and things are, growing as it's going up. So it's just something to take into consideration. Once you make the decision to place a master streams in service, there's what we call a zip, and that's a zero impact period where nothing's going to happen until you get into operation, right? So that can be frustrating, but once you are in operation, that's when things, really calm down. But it's just something to consider. With experience will tell you that, you expect it to go up right away and it's not happening. That doesn't mean the guys aren't doing their job. They're working on it. And a couple other things is my ladder placement, what I'm going to do as far as either am I going to force entry for the engine crew pulling in, or am I going to throw ladders? So what depends on my position. If I come in the alpha side, I know I'm going to try to at least get some ladders to the alpha side. I'm going to put as many ladders up, and I expected that from my companies as a battalion chief to get all the ladders out of the bed as possible for the firefighters. So you're thinking along those lines. If you can get all the way around the building, good. If not, get another special service or truck to the rear and get ladders up to the rear. There was one story I had with in my battalion. I would tell my companies, hey, we had some ladder companies and some of our hot washes, and they said, look, I'd like to see all your ladders up. This is a ladder truck. If you can get them all up on the fire ground, then let's get them up, okay? So I run a couple of fires, and hey, chief, hey, look, they'd show me the ladder work they did. Hey, great, great work. I see all the ladders are up, but you know what? They were up for me. They weren't up for purpose. Okay, they're against a brick wall. They're not up to a window. They're not up to a roof. They're up. So look, we got to do the ladders for purpose. Ladder for life, right? So it's just something that the guys did a good job. They did what I asked, but it was just something that was like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't for me. This is for the fire ground. I don't know if you expect anything like that. I've seen those, where the ladder's actually useless, but it's out of the bed. So.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to townhouses, row houses, things like that, you have to take into consideration the direction that the fire's going, and then where are you going to position your unit, and then where are your units going to go. Hey Sam, so when we'll try this, are on the ladder truck, and Sam, when you come into the block, what exactly are you looking at, and then what you've learned in the past, Sam, what have you done to kind of pass that knowledge on that you've learned as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, again, getting that first truck in, you want to get position ahead of the fire. So let's say it's an end of the row, and that's where thinking about the weather. I'm a weather nerd, so I think about the weather all the time. But that's where knowing what the weather's doing as you're turning into the block, if you can see a flag or look at the trees or whatever, or just, hey, if you have something pretty good showing, just look at the smoke. Okay, I need to get on that other side of it. So if I'm deploying my aerial to get to the roof, I'm ahead of the fire. Or if you have obvious rescues, that's obviously where you want your turntable to be. If you hey, listen, I need to get in the front of this place. To get a good scrub area at the front. I've got a guard apartment. Maybe there's nobody showing on the balconies yet. If you're on side, Charlie, there's going to be if you have a working fire. It's all about when you pull into the block, knowing what your conditions are, what the weather is, and what your job's going to be. And again, first truck got it pretty easy. Second truck got it pretty easy. Your additional trucks on your greater alarms have got to get tactical position on that building. We're going to need you. Even if it's, let's say we don't need you. That's great. But the chances are we're going to need that aerial deployed at some part if it's a greater alarm fire. And you've got to figure out as the unit officer how to get your truck in, because you're not going in the same way the first engine, first truck, or even the first box alarm units went in. You've got to find that alternate egress. And, it's paper maps, mobile data, computer maps, and of course these days, if you're on a greater alarm, you've got some time going down the road, and you don't have great mobile data computer maps. Get on the Google Maps and take a look. Get that satellite view and see what you got. Okay, it looks like I got some trees back here where I thought maybe we'd have access, that kind of thing. you're really pre-planning the game going down the road, because, again, as you very well know, you've got one shot at it. As soon as your driver hits that service brake, that's it. That's it. You're done.
Yeah, and some of the things that I looked at when I was riding a ladder truck, especially if I was running second due in the town housing complexes, depending on the time of day, on the weekends and in the evenings, lots of cars. There's usually one way in. It might be a circle, but you're not going to make that turn. You're not going. You may not be able to get. Your secondary truck's going to be responsible for the rear normally. And like you said, get in those complex maps. You may be able to come in a totally different court, a totally different street, and be able to hit the backside of these townhouses. You may have to, open up a fence or something like that. You may not physically be able to get that ladder truck back there, but you can definitely get your people back there by going through, another street or something like that. Same thing with that third due engine company. If they're responsible for the rear, you may have to come in on a totally different street and grab a hydrant, and then you might have to run that long line or a leader line to be able to either cover the backside, the basement, or an exposure or something like that. And once you start getting those greater alarms, like Shane said earlier, if you've got a decent amount of fire showing from that one townhouse and you're starting to be concerned as an incident commander of the Bravo and the Delta exposure, call for that second alarm. And I said it 1,000 times. Everybody wants to come to your fire, so invite them. And if you need that manpower, they're there. If the weather's really hot or if it's really cold, you're going to rotate your people through, and you'll have those fresh crews. But the critical things are those officers kind of need to be thinking a couple of steps ahead. Not like, all right, well, I can't get to the rear, so I'm going to park my truck a block out and we're going to walk in. Well, that sucks if you got to bring ladders and tools and all that stuff, and it's icy and whatnot. So that's why I've said all along, you want those experienced officers riding those special services. But again, we all know that it doesn't always work out that way. But the biggest thing is whatever your assignment is, you got to cover it, especially when we're talking about exposures and things like that. That incident commander might say, hey, look, we're going to write this one townhouse off. It's a loss, but I need to get into these Delta and Bravo exposures so we can knock it out right away. And what have you experienced, Shane, when we're talking about focusing in a little bit on those second due truck companies, rear responsibilities, as well as maybe that third due engine company with the rear responsibilities? What should those officers be looking for? Obviously, the alternate route to get in so you don't get jammed up, but physically, what should they be looking for as they're trying to get into position?
Well, just looking where the fire's going and the exposures, because that's going to be the greatest thing, along with the utility control and making sure that there's no one in the building. It's one thing that gets overlooked is the occupant status and driving that occupant status, if those searches have been complete, if a secondary needs to be done. Those kinds of things I want to make sure are completed, and communication with the incident commander.
Yeah, and that's key, what you said about that communication with the incident commander, because he may be looking for you coming in on that street, and you might have to say like, hey, we're going to be coming in from whatever, so you're not going to physically see my unit, but we are moving towards the rear. That the communication concept is key. I want to switch over towards looking at single family dwellings, because we get jammed up in those, whether they're split foyer, split level, Cape Cods, the neo-colonial, the McMansions, things like that. We got a little bit of that everywhere in the Mid-Atlantic area. But let's start with Cape Cod style houses, because we get into these fires, and the biggest thing that we see out of that is the knee walls and all that hidden fire, and how that can actually really jam you up when you're inside. So, Sam, when you from an incident command perspective, what are you listening for on the radio that's going to key you in that, hey, I might have knee walls, or these guys they think they're getting to the fire, but they're not because of what you're seeing? What are you looking for? And then what kind of information are you going to relay back to your guys?
The red flags. I'm listening for the red flags. High heat, low visibility, can't find the fire. Those are the big three that you hear those, and they're making the way to the second level of a Cape Cod. I mean, you're not even gambling at that point. It's in the knee walls. It's in the plenum above them, between the ceiling and the top, the peak of the roof, and all those areas need to be opened up. And I think we've all three have been on fires like that, certainly because we have so many of those buildings in areas we've worked at through our careers. And I mean, I've been on I've been on one where I was at Burtonsville. We ran mutual aid to PG, and as we pulled up, the first two engine company was coming out basically on fire. They're trying to make the upper level. And we got up there, and everywhere we hooked, we had fire. And it was, those fires, if you don't get into those void spaces quick, it can get ugly. And it's a lot of truck work. I think that's probably the most coordinated work you have to do between an engine and a truck, especially in a tight space, is the second level of a Cape Cod, because you're on top of each other and everybody's got to work, and you got to work in concert. Everywhere you're hooking, the line's got to be directed. Otherwise, you're gonna lose the place.
And what about you, Shane? What are some of the things that you've seen with Cape Cod, starting from, as a unit officer back in the day, in the olden times, and then versus what you're seeing now, as an incident commander? What do you, what were you looking for back when you were riding the seat, and then what are you doing to alleviate these conditions in the Cape Cods when they're coming up with these, like Sam said, these red flags?
Well, you have to learn those tough lessons of the Cape Cod fire itself. Once you arrive and identify it, that there are knee walls. That's the biggest thing. A young officer may not identify that or know the building construction and what's in those knee walls. We know that our experience is there's everything in there, from rugs to tires to whatever. And the other thing with the Cape Cod is the roof is right there. It's usually a wood type structure. It's pretty tight, and those are pretty hot fires. So that high heat and low visibility happens quickly, because once they start opening that up, and it gets into the dormers as well, those hidden fires, that air gets to it. And I think when we start opening it up, we start adding some of that. So you have to be prepared for that. That hose line's got to be in place. Ventilation's got to be in place, because it's a hard work fire. When I hear Cape Cod, I know I need that truck. We need special services on that second floor, opening that thing up. And I see Sam shaking his head because he's experienced them. I know that area has those. As soon as you hear that, that's, serious fire. We got to get in there. You have to be aggressive.
And Frank Ritchie did a really good video a few years back of knee walls and getting into those as you're coming up the stairs up to that second floor, of how to get those knee walls opened up, to ventilate, just to if anything, to check to make sure that you're not passing fire, because there have been instances where they get into there, they've passed those knee walls, they're up top, the smoke's banking down, it's really hot, and like Sam said, those red flags, high heat, low visibility, we can't find a fire, give me more line, all those things. You want to expose that before you get up there. I've often, if I feel as an incident commander I've got fire in the knee walls, I'll stick a truck company up on the roof right away, drop a saw into the gutter line, and kind of open those up between the gutter line and the dormer. That's where those knee walls lie, and try to get that thing opened up. At least try to alleviate some of those heat conditions so they can start opening up the walls. But those truck companies need to be prepared that roof operations may need to happen. I like to tell people, you look at a house, and how do you know they have knee walls? Well, they basically taken a triangle. They have a triangle, and they've jammed a square inside of that triangle. If you draw that on a piece of paper, you draw a triangle, and then you put a square inside that triangle, all those little spots where that square doesn't touch, those are the knee walls. You got them in the attic. You got them on the sides of the house as well. But don't be fooled by dormers, because sometimes they're fake dormers, but you got to rule that out. Moving forward a little bit, the split level houses, I see that kind of confuses people. And we've got two types out there. We've got the split foyer, which is the stairs as soon as you open up the front door. And then you actually have the split level, where you may have to go in, take a right or a left, and you got a set of stairs that go up to the bedrooms. What are some of the things, Shane, that you've seen talking about the split foyer, where you open up those doors? You get a lot of confusion as you go down a set of steps. Is that considered the basement? Because technically the windows are above the ground level. Is that the first floor? um, and what conditions can they expect on that floor above? Because we got to search. That's where the bedrooms are. So, from an engine company perspective, what are you looking at when you open that door and recognize right away, hey, I've got a split foyer?
We really have to sort it out with the incident commander what we're doing. Oftentimes, I told my crews, if we're going down a set of steps, we're in the basement. It is considered as we are going down. It's not a first floor, second floor. Um, Even if it's just a short amount of steps. If we went down something, we just said, "Hey, this is a basement." But you could go, like, I know Sam runs an area where they have even sub basements beyond that, and that even gets more difficult. We are in the sub basement now because he went down another set of steps. So those occur as well, and it's really a matter of sorting it out. Really, like the first two engine company officer with the command officer, getting that straight from the very beginning. It's easier if you could say a top floor fire or a bottom floor fire, and what's in between that's the part that gets a little dicey or confusing sometimes. So, and where are we operating? So, making your best descriptions is, to sort that out. It's the only advice I can give.
And as an officer, Sam, you roll up on the scene, captain on an engine company, open up the front door, got a split for you. You can just tell by the style of the house, and you're met with that black smoke at the front door. Where are you going? What are you going to do as the officer? You've got heat that's hitting you right away, but you're not sure where that fire is. Where are you going?
Down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We fight fires from the lowest level, and we always
Right.
have. It's funny, we've had to really define it. I think in the past 20 years, it's always happened. It's like this. Not to get off track, but like hey, give it a dash. It's coming out the window real good. Give it a quick dash, whatever you want to call that. My grandfather was doing that, when my dad was a little kid. We've named a lot of that stuff now. So, we fight it from the lowest level, and we implore that to our folks. And Shane, you were talking about the sub basements. My B shift counterpart, Christy, they had a fire the other day. It was a dryer with some extension in a sub basement, and they had to identify it. And then I heard they had a real complex one in Howard maybe like 2 months ago. I listened to it because, that's what we all do. We tune in and listen if we're not on it, right? Best way to learn, and sometimes we even know folks that are on the call, that kind of thing, or know the area. This was right across from my daughter's elementary school, and they had a decent fire in a sub basement, and the incident commander and the second engine officer almost called it instantaneously. Hey, I think we've got a sub basement here, and sure as heck they had one, and then that's where the fire was. And as soon as they got water on it, boom, the problem went away.
Yeah.
But it's like Chief Darwick said, it's clearly defining the levels, and making sure everybody, including the incident commander, is on the same page of what if you're calling it the basement, that's the incident commander's got to know where that basement is, or if there's a sub basement, that kind of thing. You got to paint that picture to everybody on the fire ground.
I think that's knowing your area, and I think we actually talked about that particular fire there in West Friendship. Yeah, I was like hands out to that, or hats off to that battalion chief, because he recognized right away. He's like, hey, we need to check for a sub basement in this perhaps. And then the engine officer from 3 came right back and said, hey, looks like we got fire in the sub basement. So they found it. That could have gotten ugly really quick, because they were having a hard time finding where the smoke was coming from. They recognized that, like you said, almost simultaneously, and they got a line in there and got that fire knocked. The fire wasn't huge, but they were really looking for it. You could have run out of air. You could have had to start throwing more resources at that thing could have taken off. So I think we were both kind of listening to that, and I was like, that was a good heads up play by those guys, kind of knowing that area. And then let's look at the split level house. That kind of can get people too. And there's times where you get to that front door, you may have to go up a couple of steps, and then you're like on the main floor, and then by looking at the style of the house, depending upon where the bedrooms look like they are, that's the direction that crew, in my opinion, like especially if you're doing a search, as that truck company's going up, as the line's going up, they may have to peel off. If they know the bedrooms are to the right, that truck officer needs to be looking for those steps that are going up off to the right. Even if they got a fire in the kitchen, they need to get up to that upper level right away and start banging out a search. You may have 2 or 3 bedrooms that are up there. So as a truck officer, reading the house right away, recognizing the style of the house, recognizing where am I going to find the steps to get up to that upper floor, and then we're going to go ahead and need to knock out a search. But I think that those 3 styles of homes, that split level, that split foyer, and that Cape Cod, is really some of the more dangerous and common structure fires that we run in the country. Very prevalent, here on the East Coast. It's called a Cape Cod for a reason. But I think that you need to get out in your first 2 area, especially if you're running medical locals. If you're the engine company running a medical local, just don't be mad that you're running a medical local at 2 a.m. Take a look at the structure. Take a look at the house. Most of the times when you get into these developments, they only had one builder, and there may be only 3 or 4 styles of houses. So get a look at them. Where are the steps? What kind of houses do we have in here? What can I be looking for? What's the backyard look like? Is it terrace? Do I have walkout? Do I have a slider? Do I have a walk up? Do I have anything? Do I have any windows that let me know that I got a basement? But it's important that as that officer, make every moment a teachable moment. Even when you're running the medical because you're getting into these houses when they're actually not on fire. So you should be taking a look around. Same thing with your apartments, your garden apartments and things like that. Know the layouts. And when they're building them, by all means, get out there and take a look at them. Looking at the neo-colonials, we'll finish up with these colonial style houses. That's what you're seeing. A lot of those weird roof lines. They have peaks and valleys all over, multiple peaks and valleys, fake dormers, things like that. But the biggest thing that I'm recognizing with these is the open floor concept. Not a lot of walls anymore, so a lot of surface area, a lot of air. The newer model construction. What are you looking at, Shane? Let's look at it through the eyes of an incident commander now as we're running these calls and they get on the scene. They've got a significant fire. What are some of the keys that you're looking at, and where do you want to start putting your resources?
It's difficult. You don't want to lose a firefighter if the place is vacant. That's occupant status changes everything, I think, as the incident commander. If that place is, and we know that it's everyone's accounted for, my attack is going to be, hey, we're going to live to fight another day. So I'm going to take a more cautious approach. Larger streams reach across the room, make attacks from the lowest level, like Sam said. Make sure that basement's clear. Make sure that there's no fire in that basement from that level before making an attack from the upper levels. And now it's really going to proceed with caution because, like you said, there's a lot of air, there's a lot of material, lots can burn. There's a lot that can catch us as firefighters. So we're learning the hard way with lightweight construction and the materials that they're using. So again, I would just say you have to proceed with caution with something like that. It's hard to. You want to be aggressive, but hey, guys, we're going to live to fight another day. We'll get it another fire. I that's the only approach I can think of.
What,
I don't know about you, Sam.
What about you, Sam? Looking at it from the perspective of an incident commander.
100%. And what's scary about those is, some of those. Well, we have a bunch of them that are in that urban-rural interface where we might not have hydrants. And by the time you get things set up, even if let's say you have hydrants, it's offset off the road down 400, 500, 600 foot down a driveway. Mm-hmm. And by the time you get the line laid, everything set up, you what you see when you first get on the scene with those, if you have a well advanced fire, it's not going to be what you have when you're ready to put your first company to work. Those things, they burn so quickly. They had one. I wasn't on it. It was on my shift. Night fire. They got there, and by the time it was rural, by the time they got ready to put the first line in service, it looked like talking to the first arriving folks, hey, I think we'll be able to get this. And then it only took a few minutes, let's say 5 minutes before, hey, we've got a water supply, we've got everything in place, we got back here, It was a completely different story because those things take off once that fire gets a headway. And that was an outside in fire. So once it got inside, I think it was still making its way inside when they arrived. And by the time they started to go to work, that thing was through the roof because it's matchsticks. It's not like it's going to take a beating.
Right.
And you've got all this time in the world to
Right.
operate. So I'm 100% like those. You can't let them fool you because, if you didn't know any better, and we do in the American Fire Service know better, but if you didn't know any better, you'd say, oh, that's full dimensional. That's a stick built house. And that thing's, that thing's going to take a pound. And no, these things do not. These things are built, everybody watching this, three of us for sure, driving by, we have areas in our response districts. One in my neighborhood down here in Turf Valley, just watching them build them up. And I'm like, those are going to look really beautiful, but I see what they're building them with. And I'm like, geez, how long are they even going to stand up without a fire condition?
Right.
Because there's not much lumber there. And the lumber that's there is engineered. And it's lightweight. And that stuff's, it can be,
Let's transition a little bit. We're gonna move heavily into some truck work now. We're gonna talk a little bit about roof work. I had the pleasure of talking to an old volunteer chief friend of mine the other day at Sykesville's Carnival. But their county where he volunteered at is moving away from roof work. And I get it. I understand the truss roof and all that stuff. It's dangerous. But to say, hey, we're not operating on roofs anymore, I think that's one of the taboos in the fire service: the always and the nevers. You can't say that because there is a time and a place for everything. Depending upon the building construction, where the fire is located. Obviously, if you've got a fire that's heavily involved in the attic. If you're going to ventilate that, you need to be doing it maybe from an aerial or something like that. But, looking at, like we talked about offline, commercial structures, we may, if you have like a strip mall, you may need to get, a good vent hole right above so those crews can push in to get that fire knocked. So let's talk a little bit about roof work, and then we'll talk about the different styles of roof work that are out there that these truck companies are facing. But just going around the horn, Sam, are you for or against it, or it's going to depend on the situation as it presents itself?
Yeah, it's certainly situation dependent. My department, the first, neither the first nor the second truck automatically go to the roof. And I know in a lot of cities where they have these, buildings that have been around for a minute, they're running mostly the same style of buildings. There is an assignment on first, second due truck, whatever. The driver goes to the roof. Somebody's going to the roof automatically, regardless. And that's not necessarily the case where I work. Certainly, if it's a single family, 1-story, type 5, and newer construction, you're not going to need to vent it. It's going to vent itself if it's up there. And it's certainly situation dependent. And what it is you're as the incident commander, you're doing a risk benefit analysis. You're doing a quick, okay, if the fire's up there, I've got a truck right here. Is this an old? And knowing the buildings, doing your scene size up. Is this an old building? Is this a peaked roof old building where I can trust that I can put somebody on the roof to drop a hole? If not, the answer is no. Certainly garden apartments, flat, mild pitches, whatever. I feel pretty confident putting somebody up there to at least get the natural openings open and that kind of stuff. But it's situation dependent. And it's because we don't have automatic assignments for the roof in my department. And I know a lot of departments do. Certainly the city departments do, but we don't have that. So it's situation dependent.
How about you, Shane?
Well, you don't want to put a firefighter directly underneath a fire. So there's active fire, just like a basement fire. You don't want them dropping through into a fire. There are times on a flat roof, commercial. I know that downtown Frederick, we've run into several of the buildings where they are have multiple roofs, built up roofs, rain roofs, things you have to get into to open up, or that fire is just going to keep traveling. And it has taken off on us. We burned a whole block off because of rain roofs or multiple built up roofs. So yeah, you don't want to put a firefighter, and I can see the safety part of that. But also, what are you doing when you're opening the roof? What's the objective? If you want to draw the fire to that hole, so you can make a trench on the either side, then that works. Or pulling it away like a strip mall. If you have one structure on fire and you want to bring that fire to that vent hole and draw it to that location. That's a method of fire attack that works. It's very successfully. That's been proven over and over. Los Angeles, they go right to the roof on residentials and open up. That's their primary means of attack. But they have terracotta roofs. It's a little different, but that's what they use. They don't subject their firefighters other than opening that roof, getting off the roof, and then they go in and make that attack. So, it's situational dependent, like Sam said. And, like you said, lightweight constructed roofing, pitched roof, keep them off. It's going to burn through in a few minutes anyway. Your hole's going to be there. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a time and a place for everything, and I would never ever rule it out. If my crews are having a hard time making to the second floor because of the heat conditions and things like that, if I think I can, I send a truck company up on the roof, drop a 4x4 at the top of the peak, and push down and get that opened up. That might alleviate some of the conditions above the stairwell if they can, so that crew can get upstairs to get a knock on the fire. If the fire's got a hold of the attic area, like you said, Shane, it's going to show itself anyway, especially if it's newer construction, the OSB, type of wood paneling that's up there, or the wood overlay that's up there, as well as the open attic spaces and things like that. It's going to show itself. And then once it does, then ventilation is done for you. There's no reason to put anybody up on the roof anyway. One of the things you hit on, you talked about trench cuts, and we just finished a class last week out in Fairfax, and we talked a little bit about trench cuts and things like that. Somebody had brought up, about inspection holes, and we talked about inspection holes. So, when you were up on the roof of those flat roofs, Shane, and we decided to go to a trench cut, we know it's labor intensive. You're going to need more than one saw and more than two people. But what are we looking about when we're trying to drop these what's the purpose of that inspection cut? And then where are you going to draw your trench?
So I want to draw the fire to the location directly over the fire. So what I'm doing is trying to actually direct to that location. The first cut has got to be directly over the fire. That brings the fire to that point. You say that's where it wants to vent, and all of it's going to come out. And expect fire when you open that hole. Now it's going to burn. That's when you go to your trench. That's you're going to save the savable property to your left, your Bravo or Delta side, whatever you choose. You're going to put your trench on, and you're going to have a line underneath and on top. Open up your trench, which you said labor intensive. It's going to take a while, but you're saving the building next door. You're pretty much writing that one off when you do a trench cut. So you want it to be on the burn side of the firewall, and like I said, you're writing it off and saving your Bravo and Delta, whatever you're going to save in that situation.
And then,
so again, like I said, you just make sure that first cut goes above the fire. If you go right to the trench, to the Bravo side and start your trench, all you're doing is drawing the fire over there, and then you're going to chase it into the next building. Okay, so you have to make that initial cut, and a lot of firefighters don't understand it. A lot of command officers don't even understand that first initial cut has to be above that fire to draw it to that location.
and that'll slow that progress, at least that lateral progress down a little bit, and then you can move over and start your trench, further down. And then those inspection holes, those are key. Those small triangular holes, you want to drop them maybe every 10 feet or something, and you have to designate someone's responsibility to keep an eye on those inspection holes, because as you start to see the smoke come out and it gets intense, the fire is drawing that particular direction. And it's not uncommon to say, hey, look, this fire is moving a lot faster than we thought it was. We're going to have to move a little further down. And it's a communications is the key. Talking back to the incident commander, you may have to move your engine companies that are trying to make a stand. They may have to move down a little bit further. But like you said, when it's like, hey, we're going to make a trench, it's no different than cutting a fire line in a brush fire, but you're writing off a certain area, but you're going to make it stop there. And that's where you're going to post your people. And one thing people need to understand, like we said in the beginning of this, is it's labor intensive, and you're going to have anywhere from 6 to 12 people, a lot of saws, because you're dealing with a lot of built up roofing material, tar, things like that, a lot of hand tools. And these guys, when they're done making that cut, they're spent. That's all they're going to do on that fire ground. So, if you are moving towards a trench, you better start calling for the additional alarms, because these people are going to be they're going to be spent. You're not going to be able to utilize them any further.
Yeah, to get some people on deck. We talked about inspection holes.
Mm-hmm.
The old pick-headed axe is your first inspection hole. Before you get off the roof, give it a whack with your pick-headed axe. That makes a good inspection hole right away. It's a small, old-school way to do it, but that's before you get off the roof. You can see if there's fire coming up or smoke coming out of that. You just give it a good whack with your pick, and that's a good start. The other thing we found was using the warthog blade, the wider blades on their saws. You don't need to make a huge triangular cut or a curve cut, because just laying that blade in there, you can tell a lot right away without making a big mess. So
yeah, and the warthog blades, and a lot of people are probably scratching their head like, what the hell's a warthog blade? But go look it up on the internet. But I'm a firm believer of the warthog blade. It's a very thick, heavy duty blade. You got to have a good saw behind it. But it did make a nice wide kerf where you could just make like a 2 foot long kerf cut, and you can watch that as that smoke starts to come out of there. Like you said, you didn't have to turn around and drop that triangular hole. But you want to do those cuts every 10 feet, and then to where you're going to be starting your trench cut. So we're going to wrap it up here. We're right approaching the 1 hour mark. Want to go around the horn real quick and just throw out some things that you've learned along the way, with the engine company, with the truck company, and then how you got to go ahead and move that into your command experience. And then, as with everything, when we learn something, it is our obligation as leaders in the fire service to teach the people coming up behind us. So I'm going to throw it to you, Sam, a little bit of parting words, and then we'll move on to Shane, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, we veteran fire officers, chiefs, the onus is on us to pass this stuff on, and it's not telling fire stories. Okay. It's passing on knowledge. You're not beating on your chest about a fire you ran. You're talking about tactics. You're talking about building construction. You're talking about, hey, this neighborhood across the street hasn't changed in the 32 years since I've been in Montgomery County, Maryland. I've known it for 32 years. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what I know about it. Tell me what you know about it, and get them involved in the conversation. And I'm telling you, these young guns out there, they want to talk about fire, because they're taking, if they're in a fire rescue department where we're responsible for EMS, they're taking a shellacking on those EMS units, and they come back from taking a shellac and they're getting dinner or whatever, and you have the chance to engage them in some fire talk, they're in. Anything but talking about the last EMS call they ran. Not that that stuff's not important, but getting their mind off of it. And, we all want to go to fires. We all want to do well on fires, and we all want to train and be prepared. But it really, the onus is on us to share the stuff that we know about these buildings, these response districts, and about tactics with this. The fire service is young. It's young these days. I can't believe how young our department is, and we have young officers. They're all great folks. These are people coming up. You think about it. It's like the fire service is in good hands. The young folks that are coming up are top notch. We got to share the stuff with them, so they're where we are one day, and they're passing it on. That's that whole pass it on thing, and that's what I got.
Cool. Shane, some parting words?
That's great, Sam. Couldn't say it any better. There's a lot of things that I see that I pass on, and a lot of it's best practices, and things that the old ways still work. Oftentimes I think, I feel like as an older officer, experienced officer, oh, well, that was the way they used to do it. What, we still do it that way today because it worked. You often hear firefighters say, "Hey, be safe, man," and they're looking out for their brother, saying, "Being safe." What does that mean? What does being safe mean? Being safe means knowing your equipment, knowing your PPE, operating safe on the fire ground. That's being safe. Okay, so I'm safe. You know, I want to be the best I can be. I want it to be, and I would pass on to other firefighters when I'm coming on my engine company. Hey, I'm coming to make a difference. I'm glad you're here. They say, "Hey, Wick's coming, man. Things are going to get better, right?" And same as a command officer. Hey, he's coming up. We're good now. And that's what you want to strive for. That's what you want to be. So that's what I had to pass on.
Awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate the good the tactical conversation. It's nice to kind of stretch the legs a little bit and get away from talking about command stuff all the time, but really pass on some of the things that we've learned along the way. Lessons learned and things like that. I think tactics is important, and it's to get to that kitchen table, do your lineup, spend 15, 20 minutes talking about tactics, talking about some of the calls that you ran, talk about some of the calls that you've seen and heard, and everything. You can learn something from everything. So, take those, file them away, pass it on, things like that. So again, Shane, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule,
Thanks for having me.
and being on here. You come with a wealth of knowledge, and I think that it's worth everybody hearing. So with that, thanks for listening to Talkin Tactics, and we will see you next month.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.